Hello, hello, welcome everybody. Tonight we are going to be starting on a Byzantium stream using the Ave Maria mod, which was recommended to me by a viewer last time. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to play around with it, but I've had a week to kind of tool around with the new mechanics this mod introduces, and I am pretty well set to react to it. So we start out here as Alexios Komnenos, who took the throne in the early 1080s and basically saved the Byzantine Empire from complete destruction. Because after the Seljuks, represented here by the Sultanate of Rum and the Greater Seljuk Sultanate, conquered Anatolia, Byzantium was jolly well fucked. A lesser emperor, it would have been over right then and there. But Alexios Komnenos and his descendants... Oh, I'm sorry. I should give my mustache a trim. It's been a busy time for me. But under a lesser leader, the Byzantines would have been done right here. But thanks to the Komnenoi, the Byzantines did manage to regain control of pretty much the entire coastline of Anatolia. So let's see if we can do that ourselves. So we get a Dynasty Legacy. I usually go with Blood because I like breeding good traits into my line. My spouse is nothing special, neither am I. Well, I do have pretty high military stats, but I've got no special... Sure, what's up? I have found that the only real way to win this war with the... Okay, so that actually feeds in pretty well to what I'm... But that actually fits in pretty well to what I'm talking about here. So, the Ottomans are just one of the dynasties that arose after the Seljuk Turks and the Turkic invaders of Anatolia collapsed into several smaller political bodies. The Ottomans were based right around here, and they were simply the most successful of the Turkish Beyliks that occupied Anatolia after the fall of, well, most of Byzantium. The Ottomans grow into a serious threat and cross into Europe, where they fight against the Christians in two crusades. Varna and... it was the Crusade for Varna, and I'm blanking on the other one. The Turks originally came from right around here, somewhere in Central Asia. That's their language is actually not related to any of the languages that previously had existed in Anatolia. They were completely new to the region. I'm not. I know that is still a very touchy debate among fans of the Roman Empire, so I'm not even going to start getting into the middle of that one. What I am going to do is start setting up my victory here. So, we are pretty worthless. My biggest gripe about this mod is that it is good at capturing what the Eastern Roman government was like in this period. But the amount of men that you can summon up is pretty pathetic. At this point, even missing Anatolia, the Byzantines would have been able to muster 10, 15,000 men. So the fact that you only have about 3,300 at your disposal is pretty pathetic compared to what the Byzantines would actually have been able to do at this time. So I found the only real way to beat this is to use our brothers and sisters for everything they're worth. So let's do just that. So I found that the combination of Croatia, the Holy Roman Empire, we can actually get in an alliance here, and we can also get France. All three of them together should be able to help us kick the Normans back into Italy. Alright, there we go. Now we call them into war. And we're going to let them do the heavy lifting. Because I don't really want to go bankrupt, which is what happened to me in several of my test runs. But they give us 3 unmarried siblings of the right sexes to get this alliance combo. So let's put them to work. Yeah, not so tough now, are you? So much for you being a fox. And there's the Crusades, which is going on a bit too early. The Crusades really trace their origins back to the Council of Piacenza and the later Council of Clermont. They weren't really there was talks of them earlier, but they didn't really become a thing until the 1090s. So yeah, we're going to let our German and Croatian buddies do all the heavy lifting here, and we're only going to step in if we get in danger of losing, which we shouldn't be because these guys will mostly stick to Epirus. The other thing I'm not overly fond of in this mod is you have no control over your advisors. They are just kind of foisted upon you, and a lot of them suck. They also kind of make Constantinople, and Constantinople's fine, but the surrounding area is very underdeveloped for what the Byzantines would have had going on at this period. Also, yeah, so I like the Roman Empire as much as any other historian, but the Byzantines had way cooler hats. Like, look at this shit. Way cooler hats. The other issue with this mod is it is computer nuking because it adds so many new territories. I wish I could get like the governmental reforms without having to deal with the huge number of extra counties, because that is trouble. Also, I really would like it if my allies would fucking get over here. They're kind of central to this whole strategy. Alright, come on. You see, only this hardened core of the Norman army is actually any good. Mercenaries. I'm not gonna hire mercenaries. You can get the fuck out of here. I'm letting my buddies do all the heavy lifting here. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have the men to fight them, but I have some really big, nasty friends who can fight them for me. Okay, yeah, no, once they move into Epirus, it shouldn't take... unless they're... Oh, you fucking idiots. Come on, go south and fight the actual enemy. I don't need you fucking around in Montenegro. Wait. Apparently I'm gay. Who are you? Get out of here. There we go. I think I might have to get involved, otherwise these guys are not going to do what I actually need them to. There they go, okay. This should do it. Come on, get in there, losers. Fight for me. Holy shit. These guys are getting fucking nuked. Alright, I guess I should step in. I got this strategy to work for me once, and if it can work for me once, it can work for me again. He called in some friends too. That's just great. Alright, we have a son. He's really nothing special. but he's tall. I don't know how we know that. He's a fucking baby. And there we'll go. We'll just blow all our money on that. Cool, cool. You couldn't have waited just a few more months on that. Yeah, we're gonna restart. I know I can make this strategy work. I made it work. And I'm gonna fucking make it work. Because historically, the Byzantines did not lose Epirus here. They beat the Normans back. But because they fucking nerfed Constantinople so bad in this mod, that is also true. The Varangians would have played a bigger part in this as well. I also have a nice little loading screens mod that adds in a bit more variety. This, I think, is supposed to be medieval Russia, based on what I know of, well, medieval Russia. Alright, let's try this again. Unmarried siblings, go find me some friends. Holy Roman Empire. And France. Have they got any other unmarried relatives I can throw at these people? Let's go with Basilius. And again, military focus. That'll be good. And we'll take blood. And I'm going to want county control in Bithynia. And what I do find is that the Sultanate of Rome usually completely collapses in on itself. Which it didn't do historically, but that's usually what seems to happen in this mod. Alright, that's the Kaiser. And that's France. So let's get these guys in here. And hope my computer doesn't fucking implode. Alright, there we go. And that's the Crusade, but hopefully we can avoid that. Oh, why did we lose all these dudes? See, we get the Varangians, but they're mercenaries, and they're expensive ones too. Realistically, that would not have been... They were technically mercenaries, but they were always loyal to the Emperor in Constantinople. Farms and fields. Walls and towers. Farms and fields. And walls and towers. Now, hopefully, I can hold off my wife getting pregnant, because I don't really want to deal with that right this second. As long as he doesn't call in too many of his friends, he doesn't get too many of his friends, we ought to be fine. Yeah, they have such high quality, which I guess makes sense. The Normans were one hell of a fighting force in this period, but I think they exaggerated just a titch. And yeah, that's the number one thing that I think annoys me about this thus far is you don't pick your own advisors. You get these shitty ones that take forever to do their actual fucking jobs. Okay, now I'm not going to raise my armies yet. Now, the French just set out. It'll take them fucking forever to get here. Okay, now we'll raise them. And start marching on the enemy. This war is winnable. I have won it. And if I can win it once, I can win it again. Now, hopefully they'll all muster on me, and we can attack them at once. That was what happened. Last time, they all slowly started just glomming onto the enemy. Let's meet him in Skopje. This should get them all with me. Now, let's go kill them all. Stop here. I can't get my allies to fucking... There we go. Let's go attack the elite of his army first. Or not, because he moved. Fuck. My sister-in-law popped out a kid. Alright, come on. There we go. There we go. I think that might have it. Or at least, it's a start. Let's kick the shit out of his elite soldiers. And out of these Sicilians here. Get them out of the occupied land. Which does not take long in this mod, because none of this is developed. Let's go. We gotta keep hunting them down, otherwise we're never gonna be rid of these assholes. That's right. Get the fuck back to Italy, you assholes. Yeah, we're going to be in a lot of debt. No, I don't care. It's better than losing half of my remaining empire to these dicks. Alright, I am going to disband my men there. Oh, my vassal got injured. That sucks. But we're making decent progress. So I'm going to send my guys away. Oh, fucking hell. France, why are you doing this to me? Alright, there we go. Yeah, we're going to be in a hell of a lot of debt. But I need to win this war if I want to have a snowball's chance in hell of succeeding in this run. That was a weird way of illustrating it, but okay. I'm trying to disband this army, but I don't know why. There we go. Disband them, then I hopefully am not losing all of my money. And I can let my allies finish this one up. Yeah, they have high quality, but there's so few of them now. They haven't got even a small chance in hell. And I will just let my allies wrap this shit up. Yes, I know that I am in debt. You don't need to keep telling me. It's gonna be fine. Once we've killed every last one of these Norman pricks. Alright, we can get... Let's go with extravagant court titles to keep my council happy. Alright, now my wife is pregnant. Hopefully we can wrap up the... Hopefully she either has a daughter or I can wrap up this war before it becomes a problem. How are you losing? Come on, allies. Fucking need you here. Alright, we are making money now. That's good. There we go. Yeah, that's exactly what should fucking happen. I don't care how high their quality is. All right, she had a son. He's tall. That's nice. And born in the purple is a good trait to have. But now we're going to lose a fuckload of money to maintain our popularity and prestige. But it is what it is, and we should be able to get a decent amount of shekels once we beat the living shit out of what's left of the Norman army. Any second now. There, that's it. That's it. I think they gave him event troopers. That's the only way that I can explain how powerful he is. Nice. Nice. We aren't in debt anymore, although we'll soon be back in debt. That's okay, because I think we're just replenishing the losses that we took. But we have a kid. That's good. Now we can start looking at the Sultanate of Rum. Which, as I was saying earlier, is really the origin point of the Ottoman Turks. The Sultanate of Rum, which was meant to be the Sultanate of Rome, that's what they were trying to say here, was the name of what the Seljuks did after they took power. That's the political body they established in Anatolia. Now, it took a very long time for them to actually culturally convert Anatolia and to fully Islamize it. So we have some time, but I think my first reconquest will be securing the rest of my main duchy here. Because here's the thing, the Sultan of Rum doesn't actually have that many men, and I should be able to fight him on my own. Howdy! Welcome to the stream. I am reacting to that Byzantine mod that was recommended to me last time, and it's going pretty well, all things considered. Oh, I have another son. Oh, son of a bitch. Yeah, I know having sons is good, but now I don't have any money, and I need money. But I don't want to lose popularity and prestige, because those are really important in this mod. Yes, so I did that by allying myself with the HRE, Croatia, and France, and I let them do most of the heavy fighting. So now it's going to get boring as we wait for our money to come back. And we restore our control over our counties. Alright, he's good. He's really good. And the only one that's really up to us is our spy master. He looks good. Let's go with him. And we'll... Yeah, no, that's the thing about this mod, is they really nerf Constantinople as a city. It's a lot weaker than it is in the base game. So you're kind of fucked. They added in a whole lot of counties, but they didn't really balance them all that well. So it's like, I have all these counties, but none of them is built up all that much. Actually, I should research battlements so I can actually get a decent amount of men under my control. The other annoying thing about this mod is you have no control whatsoever over who is in your council. That is completely up to the Byzantine government, which they added in with this tab. Luckily, all of these people like me. So we're probably alright. And she's pregnant again, and I'm really hoping it's a daughter. But having an alliance with the King of Georgia will actually be a big help against the Sultan of Rum, because somehow he has even more men than I do. I'm just going to let him raid, because I don't have the money to raise my army right now. Alright. Not off to a bad start. At least we're doing better than we were last time. And now we're losing money, but our neighbor can be vassalized, so that's fun. What am I quaffing? I don't know what that word means. Forgive my ignorance, I'm gonna... Okay, sorry. So, I am drinking an Irish whiskey called the Sexton. It's really good. I highly recommend it. It is a very, very tasty whiskey. And I forgive my ignorance. I am a firm speaker of American English, so I'm not all that familiar with... that sounds English, so... like British English. Let's be friends with him. It's a very smooth... price point can't be beat. It's about the same price as a bottle of Jameson, but way higher quality. It's peaty. It's a little sweet. Pick yourself up a bottle if you can find one. Actually, pouring myself a bit more here. I'm gonna be finishing this bottle off tonight, actually. But it also has a really cool bottle. I love the hexagonal shape. I gotcha. Take it you're not home right now then? But yeah, I've been able to find it pretty regularly in Maryland. I don't know what the situation... Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, then you should be able to get it. I've found it around the mid-Atlantic, so you should be able to find some. I gotcha. I know, I've heard of a lot of people making that move from New York to Texas in particular. Yeah, break the new house in with a bottle of the Sexton. If you like Irish whiskey, you'll really like this. Now, I like my bourbon, I like my rye, and I like my scotch too. Irish whiskey, though, always has a very special place in my heart. Very nice. That is some good stuff too. My cousin and I have the bourbon versus rye debate all the time. I am firmly on the side of bourbon whiskey. Like, I like rye, but bourbon is way better. That sounds tasty. I've never heard of it, but it sounds tasty. Well, why can't I ask him for money anymore? That sucks. But yeah, this I actually need to pick myself up a new bottle of. Actually, fun fact about the history of distilled beverages in particular. They were actually, so distilling as a practice was actually invented by an Arab alchemist. Oh, I gotcha. Okay. So that is definitely a special bottle. So there was an Arab alchemist hanging out in the Middle East sometime in the 10th or 11th century, and he developed the alembic, which was one of the first devices for distilling, and he was using it to make medicinal alcohol. But at the time, Irish monks were very well traveled, and they got all around the world, and some Irish monks found their way to the Middle East, probably during the Crusades, and they discovered the alembic, and they brought it back to Ireland with them, and they started making the fun kind of alcohol. And then it spread to Scotland and slowly the rest of Europe. Though before that, there was a distilled beverage made in China, the name of which escapes me. It was a very different. Yep, there you go. It's Irish whiskey is special. Let's go with lead by example and get that prestige bonus. Yep, I've also heard it referred to as aqua vitae in Latin. Um, but no, Irish whiskey is special stuff. Oh, we can get some vassals. Nice. I'll take you. Take you. Take you. And I'll take you. Alright, so there's the complete collapse of the Sultanate of Rum. Oh, it is. Kentucky bourbon is like any of the whiskeys that are like super associated with a location. It might have been a Persian. They all have Arab names, so I could be mistaken there. Or at least their names are all in Arabic. But it was an Islamic alchemist somewhere in the Middle East who invented the alembic. This is awesome. So yeah, as Rum collapses, we should be able to pick up a bunch of vassals. This is exactly what happened in the previous run. There we go. Nice. And I can ransom you for just a handful of shekels. But no, Kentucky bourbon is some awesome stuff. My personal favorite bourbon, at least what I've been drinking a lot of right now, is James E. Pepper's 1776. That is some quality stuff. I found it all over Maryland, and pick yourself up a bottle. It's worth trying. I'm gonna try to restore Byzantium first, and then if the run is going well enough, I'm gonna try to restore at least Justinian's empire. Oh, Maker's Mark is delicious. See, but that's a wheated bourbon, so I find it's a lot smoother than these sort of more traditional bourbons. And yes, I can help you, Kaiser, and I know you helped me, but I don't have any money, you see. Soon I will have money, and then I can help you, but not until then, probably. But yeah, I like wheated bourbon quite a lot. It is some good stuff. But it's not as, like, fiery as normal non-weeded stuff. I mean, here in howdy, welcome to the stream. Nice, I might have to check them out. But here in Maryland, we get some nice local distillers. Let's vassalize all of these people. Alright, let's do this and this. Yeah, no. You can waste a lot of money on whiskey. That's why I like the Sextant. It is the best whiskey I've had in like the $30 bottle range. It's like I found it for like 26 bucks near me. Um yeah, they have a few decent beers. See, I feel like I'm kind of spoiled sitting here in Maryland because we've got a lot of really good craft breweries. I have never actually had it. It's always I've never had the occasion. But at my cousin's wedding, I recently had some. What was that? Lagavulin, which was nice. It was like making out with Nick Offerman. It tasted like leather and peat, and it was nice. Would drink again if it weren't an $80 bottle of whiskey. Yeah, exactly. It is expensive stuff. It wasn't my bottle. He cracked it open for all the groomsmen, so I was happy to have some, but I don't think I'd buy it for myself. As I go to the liquor store and I look at some of those like super high end bottles, and I'm like, who honestly has like $300-400? I've never had that one either. Um, I am really envious. That is on my list. I would love to visit the South and just tour a bunch of bourbon distilleries. Yeah, yeah. There's some wild shit. You can find there's a Russian vodka brand that sells their stuff in bottles shaped like Kalashnikov rifles, which is honestly kind of badass, but stupid as hell. All right, let's see how long we can hold this. I have never had the opportunity to try potato vodka. Most of which you can find here, I find like at least in Maryland, is very. I let me know how that is because that sounds like a lot of fun. But most I find that most of the bourbon or most of the vodka you find in the states is like just grain alcohol. But I would love to try the potato stuff. Maybe I'll pick myself up a bottle then next time I'm at the liquor store. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have all that much experience with vodka. Um, I love whiskey. I like rum quite a lot, and I mean, people think of rum as just like a fancy, like a mixer, but I find there are some really nice, like barrel aged bottles of rum that taste fantastic. Yeah, I will give that a go and see how it is. I'm always up for good alcohol that will not break the bank. Well, this is going a lot more smoothly than my last one. This is awesome. They all want to be my vassal again, which is awesome. You'll be back on top in no time. Nice. There we go. Sure. I will totally help you. I don't want to create that because then it takes it away from you. Sebasteo, where is that? I will create that one. Ooh, nice. That sounds like some good stuff. My favorite that I usually pick up a bottle of is Havana Club, which is a Puerto Rican rum but made in sort of the Cuban way because they're a family that fled the revolution. That's a lot of rum. That sounds awesome. Sorry about that. Someone popped in. All right, there we go. Yeah, I'm lucky as someone who likes his alcohol in Maryland. We have a lot of really awesome local breweries and distilleries that are all cranking out some great stuff. They all just want to rejoin the empire, which is fantastic. All right, now we're making some real income. That's good. All right, this is all. We're off to a pretty good start, honestly. And it looks like they're just going to keep breaking off from room, which is good for me. If you ever find a bottle by Twin Valley Distillers, they make this 1812 bourbon. It's fantastic stuff. Well, I already have an Andronikos. Let's go with Alexios. Yeah, I've got to maintain my popularity, which is actually pretty damn good. I am beloved. I'm not familiar with that one. Near me is a Bordy winery, which makes some pretty solid stuff. I'm not that big of a wine guy. I can appreciate a nice wine. It's just not my thing. Something I never got that into. Also, what counties do I directly Oh wow, that is a lot. Um, let's see here. I completely missed me getting those directly. So now it looks like Pontus has declared itself. So I've only really got one rival left in Anatolia then. And he's weak. Okay, so mopping up what's left of Anatolia should be fairly easy. And then I can focus on reconquering the Levant and Egypt. I need to start assigning some guardians. I got very swept up in what was going on. Alright, I will look after the boy. Yeah, so my computer is starting to chug. Yeah, no, I just completely forgot about it. I think I've already got a request in on him. Dionysios. It's one of those things that usually ends up slipping my mind. Very nice. Yeah, Maryland's a weird state for a lot of reasons. You can grow a lot of stuff pretty well here. So we get a lot of good local breweries and vineyards because they both grow pretty well here. The best Maryland wine I've ever had was a port from a vineyard out near Frederick. It wasn't Black Ankle. I can't remember the name of it. Well, they've always been a problem. Okay, so now Polycarpos is my heir. What the hell? Okay, well, it's back to being... Alright, there we go. Alright, I can probably create a few titles as well. Once I have the gold... Yeah, that is one of the things that always makes me laugh about him. Socialist who owns multiple houses and is himself a millionaire who constantly complains about millionaires. Yeah, get out of here. I don't even know what you did. I'd have no issue with Bernie Sanders if he actually lived by the principles he preached, but he doesn't. I can jive with somebody who has extreme beliefs, even if they disagree with my own, so long as they actually stick to them. But he really doesn't. Alright, I'm gonna have to usurp a bunch of titles. So one thing that this mod gets very right... Howdy, welcome to the stream. So one thing this mod gets very correct is, yeah, exactly. I can tolerate a lot of weird beliefs. I mean, I'm like on the wacky end of libertarians myself. So I can tolerate a lot of weird beliefs. What I can't tolerate is is a hypocrite, really. What was I talking about? So, interesting thing about the theme system that this mod kind of introduces is the theme system was a really interesting political move on the part of the emperors of Byzantium. So, during the age of Islamic invasion, the emperors had a lot of trouble with Islamic raiders who would come across the border. They weren't necessarily organized conquering armies, but they were enough to cause a lot of trouble. So, what the emperors started doing is they created the theme system, where the empire was divided up into large military districts, basically, where civilian and military leadership were rolled into one. And the strategoi, who ruled over the themes, were effectively generals. And when a local threat emerged, they had a lot of leeway to raise their own armies to deal with the problem. So decentralizing rule was actually a very good move for the Byzantines because it allowed them to better deal with a lot of the problems they were facing in this period. So it could have easily turned into that, but when each strategos died, his territory was returned to the emperor, and the emperor would appoint a new strategos. So it didn't really concentrate in the hands of a small number of people, at least not at first. The system did become corrupt over time, but the idea of the themes was good. It was sort of a decentralized system that allowed the Byzantines to better respond to local threats. Because oftentimes the entire imperial army wasn't needed if it was just a small Arab or Turkish raiding band. You typically only needed the full imperial army when they really showed up to fuck things up. Do I help him? I'll help him. He's a much closer ally, so he'll be much better to have later on. So yeah, the system could have become that. It never really did. So the goal for this playthrough, I haven't really decided. A listener last time, or a watcher last time, wanted me to basically review this mod. So I'm just kind of I'm tooling around as Byzantium, and I've already done better than they did historically. So I guess my long-term goal, I'm going to try to restore the Empire of Justinian, which would include all of Italy, some of Spain, and all of North Africa and the Levant. So yeah, I think that's a decent goal for us to have. Let's try to restore Justinian's empire. Though, in my honest opinion, Justinian and Theodora get too much credit. Most of their success, they were both visionaries, but a lot of their success is due to the skill of one Flavius Belisarius, who is one of the most underrated generals in history. Despite being outnumbered and outmanned in almost every battle he fought, he won a majority of them. And he almost managed to restore the, Narses was an interesting one, but he was also important to the success of the of Justinian's empire. But there's a great book called Belisarius. I'll take the prestige. That is all about the man's life and what he did, because he was the main reason for Justinian's successful reconquest of most of the West. That doesn't happen if you don't have Justinian Belisarius being a fucking badass throughout the entirety of the early 5th century or 6th century. Okay, I think this war is just about won. Actually, let me see if I can't find that book for you guys. It is a really good read. It's a really fast read. And if you're at all interested in early Byzantine history, check it out. Here it is, Belisarius, the Last Roman General by Ian Hughes. This is one of the best books I have ever read about the period. I just put it in chat. Read that if you want to learn more about one of the greatest military commanders you have never heard of. All right, let's give him these titles here. And if you want to learn even more about Byzantium, I recommend Lost to the West, which is a fantastic book by Lars Brownsworth. That is, honestly, if you have even a cursory interest in the Byzantine Empire, that is a really good primer on the whole of Eastern Roman history. It is pretty cheap. You can find it on Amazon. Give it a read. because it's basically the whole of Byzantine, and really anything by Lars Brownsworth is going to be good. He is a very accessible, easy to read historian who has. He almost makes it into like a novel. Sorry, I'm burping so much. Yeah, he almost makes it into a novel, and he makes these people into almost characters that are very easy to relate to. So definitely check out any of his books. He also wrote a great one called The Sea Wolves, which was about the Viking Age, and I also highly recommend that book. I will talk more about that in a second. Okay, that's none of those are factions we particularly need to worry about. I can negotiate alliances, which I will do, because that sounds good. I can post that one here as well. Yeah, The Sea Wolves: A History of the Vikings by Lars Brownworth. It is I think it's a very recent book, so it's pretty up to date on Viking Age history, and it was a major source for the episodes I did on the Viking Age, which you can find here. Hold on just a minute. And I have been working on the latest episodes of the podcast, but I have been so insanely busy lately. My girlfriend and I are moving in together, and we've both had a lot on our plates. So I haven't had that much time to devote to the latest episodes, but I'm almost done my research for the next episode, which will cover the reign of Constantine. So check this one out for early Viking Age stuff. And the second episode I did on the Viking Age, you can find here. Twilight of the Gods and Northern Fury for my first series. And my first series, I decided I wanted to cover something that doesn't really get a whole lot of press, which was the early medieval period. So in that series, I basically covered everything from the fall of Rome to the Seljuk invasion, or the fall of Western Rome in 476, to the Seljuk invasion of Anatolia in 1071. Because what I found is, in most of my history classes growing up, they started with 1066 when talking about medieval history. And that's great. There's a lot that happened post-1066. But there is so much medieval history that happened before that that gets neglected. Peasants. I'll just let them do what they're gonna do. That's fine. Why do they keep changing my air on me? Alright, who's my oldest son? You, Polycarpos. Let's name him Symbasilius to guarantee. And that was something that emperors often did, is they would basically appoint their successor while they were already alive to make sure that, well, the empire didn't descend into a civil war shitstorm after they died, which the Roman Empire had a long history of doing. I'll help you. I mean, in word only. But, I've got Anatolia to focus on here. Okay, Sultan of Rum. Let's beat the shit out of you. Alright, raise all armies. Let's beat the shit out of the Turks. We need to restore Byzantium. They really did. So it's funny. A lot of the propaganda that the British Empire deployed against the Irish to sort of disparage them, it painted them as like heathen barbarians that didn't know anything about Christianity. Well, the British were only Christian, or the English were only Christian because of the Irish. So when the Romans pulled out of Britain, it was invaded by the Anglo-Saxons. And the Anglo-Saxons were pagans. So the British Isles were re-Christianized by Irish monks who went eastward from Ireland to restore Christianity to southern Britain. Hold on. Why can I not? Okay, it needs to be in a friendly area. That's fine. But the Irish were making a lot of very beautiful art and were having basically a full-blown intellectual revival in the late early medieval period. They really don't get enough credit, honestly. Exactly, and if you've ever seen it, it is stunning. I had the opportunity to go visit Trinity University's library, which is where it lives, and words don't do it justice. It is absolutely gorgeous. Definitely something you need to see before you die. Trust me, when all this COVID horse shit is over, I'm taking another trip. I miss traveling. I really do. I've been to Europe twice, and both times it was incredible. Um, but I still feel like there's so much of the world I want to see and so little time to see it all. Yeah, my sister just went on a cross-country voyage from California all the way back to Maryland, and that is also a trip I would very much like to do. The only problem with going to Europe is it is expensive. I saved up for years to avoid both trips, but the real wild thing is I was actually in London a week before the Brexit vote, and it was a fucking crazy time to be in London, I'll tell you that. And I did, yes, it is. So on that trip, we visited Dublin, London, and Rome, and we blew almost all of our money in London. Dublin is pretty damn affordable. Well, not necessarily. Rome is pretty cheap, actually, especially like if you're an American going to Rome. Um, it was pretty damn cheap. You could get a lot of food for like when I was in Rome, you could get a whole pizza, um, and like a whole bottle of wine for €15. It was great. Of the three, I think Italy was my favorite to visit. Yeah, exactly. Italy is a great time, and it's of the three, that's the country I most want to go back to because I only really got to see Rome. I mean, true, but see over there they've been making wine so long, even the cheap stuff is fantastic. But so we went on like tours and stuff in Ireland and England. Budapest is very high on my list. Howdy, welcome to the stream. Yeah, Budapest is very high on my list of places I want to visit. Um, the next trip to Europe I take is probably going to be Poland, Czechia, Hungary. All three are super high on my list. I want to see Warsaw, Krakow, Prague, Budapest. Basically, all of like the big cities of sort of Eastern Central Europe. Um, that they are all very high on my list. Every picture I've seen of Prague and Budapest is gorgeous. Oh, you're Czech? Nice. Yeah, my heritage. I've been to actually all the countries my heritage came from. I'm a mix. I'm half Irish, a quarter French, a quarter German, and I've been to all three. Of the three, I think I enjoyed France the most, but I think that was where. Nice. Yeah. So you're that right in this neighborhood then. Um, but of the three sort of heritage trips I've done, so this is actually a 1081 start from a Byzantium mod that was recommended to me that is really nice. Oh, that's actually really cool. I know that my Irish ancestors were nobility, the Lynches of Galway, which is right about here, which I've been to, and I've seen the family castle, which is a bank now. So much for noble origins. Um, but I think of the three sort of heritage trips I've gone on, France was my favorite, because we spent a lot of time in Normandy. And I will tell you, Normandy is one of the most geographically beautiful places on Earth. Like just rolling hills and farmland and tiny villages as far as the eye can see. That's really cool, actually. That is really cool. Um, yeah. Other than that, my family is pretty New World. They all came to the states a fairly long time ago. Um, my earliest ancestors in North America were actually the French ones. Um, I'm the I'm related to some of the earlier French settlers in Canada. And over time, they worked their way down to the states, and then my German ancestors have been here since the Revolution. They were actually Hessian mercenaries that were hired by the British at the time to fight the revolution because they didn't have the manpower to do it themselves. Um, Quebec is also very high on my list of places. There's so many places I want to go, but I don't have the time and money to actually go. Um, but no, Quebec is very high on my list. My grandmother, her family comes from what was it? They're from a small town outside of Montreal. I'm blanking on the name. I do know that I am a very distant relative of Justin Trudeau, for whatever that's worth. Not much in my estimation, but yeah, no, I'm not exactly super proud of that one. Hold on one second, guys. Sorry about that. I had a phone call coming in. So yeah, that's not something I'm exactly proud of, but wait, hold on 1 second again. Sorry. Hey there, sweet pea. What's up? Sorry about that, guys. I am back. So yeah, we've got Anatolia, and I seem to have provoked a conversation about French Canada. Um, so yeah, my family is from, at least part of my mom's side is from right around Montreal. I'm I wish I could remember the name of the. It's a very small town. Um, no, both cities are very high on my list. And actually, my girlfriend is Scots Canadian, so we've been talking for a long time about doing a Gulf of St. Lawrence trip to see our nearest ancestry, basically, our nearest foreign ancestry. Um, so yeah, we'd probably go from up the river from Montreal out to Nova Scotia, which is where her family's from. Howdy, welcome to the stream. I'm pretty sure Quebec is the oldest walled city in North America. I could be wrong. I think the only other place it might be is St. Augusta in Florida. Okay, cool. Oh shit, I gotta plan this better. I need good genetics. Let's breed some good genes into my line. Thing about this mod is it seems to have limited a lot of the good genetics you can get. But she will make sure that Normandy stays relatively passive. But I did notice a comment there. I'm sure that Montreal and Quebec are both way better than Baltimore. As someone who is from Baltimore, I have a certain amount of affection for the city, but it is something. Why can I not usurp? Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. So yeah, that's because I am playing with a mod on called Ave Maria, which basically changes the entire structure of Roman government. It's really cool. I have a few gripes with it, but overall, I think it's a pretty solid mod. In that, especially in that it really appreciates that Byzantium was very different from Europe during this period. It was still much better organized than anything that was going on in Western Europe during the medieval period. And I have switched over to Havana Club Rum, which is another recommendation of mine. It's very nice Puerto Rican rum that it'll only run you about $20 a bottle. Yeah, I never quite liked that. And even then, the sort of feudalism you see in game, um, I've never heard of that, but I will look for it. But yeah, I've never the sort of feudalism you see in the base game. It's very correct in terms of French and Holy Roman Empire feudalism, in that the feudal lords have a lot of autonomy and they pretty much do whatever the fuck they want and operate as sort of semi-autonomous states. It doesn't do a good job of conveying Anglo-Saxon feudalism or what was going on in Byzantium or even Spain, honestly. None of which were as sort of disorganized as what was going on in France and the Holy Roman Empire. Also, I can't say I've ever had gin, but I am. Actually, they were larger at their peak, and mind you, this is a little bit into the game, so not 100% accurate. Hold on one second. So the Seljuks were absolutely enormous at their height. They were one of the largest Islamic dynasties since the fall of both the Umayyads and the Abbasids. And basically they got that big by conquering the yeah, they were slightly larger, and at one point they controlled all of Anatolia too, as well as all of modern day Azerbaijan and Armenia and a bunch of other places. I will check that out. I do like my rum. They probably also they did control a bit more of Central Asia than they do in this mod. That sounds like something I'm gonna have to check out then. I do appreciate my rums, and honestly, Havana Club is about as close as you can get to Cuban rum in the states, because it's made by a right. So that battle did happen. It was on the frozen waters of Lake Peipus, which is right here between the modern Estonia and Russia. Um, but the ice never broke. So basically, what they did was the Russian army set up at the narrowest point, which would have been right about here. And the Germans charged across the frozen water, and Nevsky's army managed to completely destroy them. Um, it was a complete victory for the Russian forces and drove the Germans back. But the battle on the lake did happen, but the ice never broke. And actually, typically when armies wanted to fight in the Baltic region, they would wait until winter, because this is all very marshy land, and it's very difficult to march armies through marshes. So in the winter, the marshes would freeze over, and they were actually able to march armies through it. So it was one of the few places where they would fight in the winter quite frequently. Huh. I didn't actually know that was the original source of rum. Oh, Hungary's in a civil war. Alright. Let's see if we can go to war with him again. Not quite. See, this is the problem. We've got a truce with this guy, and he's the only person we can really fight right now. So in the meantime, let's beef up some of our counties. And Constantinople itself. What else can we build here? Well, walls and towers, we want that, obviously. And Chalcedon. That also sounds tasty. I do like my brandy too, though it's fairly expensive, so I don't get it all that often. Um, if I can, my goal for this run is Justinian's empire. So I still have to conquer Croatia, Italy, Egypt, the Levant, all of North Africa, and then southern Spain. And then if I can do that with some time left in the run, I will try to reform the Western Empire too. I'm getting pretty close to almost. Oh yeah, definitely. But this mod, it kind of makes Byzantium a little bit overpowered, honestly, because I don't have to constantly deal with the internal civil wars that you get in the base game. Granted, my computer might crap out on me before that because this mod adds so many counties. Um, Let's see, can we do... Oh, I definitely cannot do that. They've still got almost 10,000 men under their command. I would get obliterated. Now, right now my goal is to restore all of Anatolia. And to that end, I'm going to get some Varangians up in here. The Varangians are one of my favorite, like, oddball stories from history. They were just such a weird group of soldiers that must have stuck out like a sore thumb in the medieval Near East, because you gotta figure seeing somebody extremely pale, typically blonde hair, oftentimes blue eyes, and usually standing about a head taller than anybody else you'd ever met must have looked like a freak. Yeah, that's because the Sultanate of Rum completely imploded. And a lot of the local Byzantine rulers rebelled, and then they became my vassals. Yeah, it is. It's something. But yeah, I got to imagine. Well, one of my favorite Varangians was Harald Hardrada, who he went to prison for the actual crime was debauching a noblewoman, which is delightfully vague. I love it. But the punishment was to be thrown in a lion's pit, and he was. And the thing about Harald Hardrada is that Harald Hardrada was quite literally a fucking giant. A lot of the records I've seen say he stood over 7 feet tall, and given that height, he probably weighed close to 300 pounds. He would have been enormous for the period. But when the Roman guards came in the morning to collect his corpse, they found that he had strangled the lions with his bare hands. And they just let him go, because in all honesty, are you about to pick a fight with the guy who just strangled lions to death with his bare hands? I'm sure not. I don't get paid enough for that shit. I mean, really, this Viking giant walks out of the goddamn lion's pit, having strangled all of these apex predators to death, and you're gonna fuck with him? No, nobody's gonna fuck with that guy. And then he got his own little like mountain moment when he broke out of prison. He went to prison a second time, and during a riot in Constantinople, he broke out of prison, and he proceeded to gouge the eyes out of the emperor at the time with his bare hands. Then he and his men sailed the ship right back up the Volga, or is this the I'm blanking on the name of this river, right back up to Kiev. That wouldn't have been out of the ordinary, but no, he was interested. So, yeah, the Dnieper, that's it. So the whole reason he went down to Constantinople is when Harald Hardrada first left Norway, he went to Kiev, which was at the time a Viking kingdom. So he fell for the daughter of the Grand Prince of Kiev, but when he asked for her hand in marriage, the Prince of Kiev said that he wasn't good enough for her. So he went to Constantinople, amassed a fortune, strangled lions to death, killed an emperor, and then sailed right the fuck back to Kiev and plopped his treasure down and was like, what now? And then he was able to marry the daughter of the Prince of Kiev. Then he went back to Norway and fought his nephew for the throne. And then he had a rather anticlimactic death in the invasion of England. He was an absolute fucking legend. See, he personally led Byzantine invasions of both Iraq and Sicily. He won both campaigns. He was a remarkably effective commander. Also true, so when the Scandinavians first arrived at Constantinople, they would have never seen anything even remotely like that. The biggest and most well-developed cities they might have seen would have been like London or Paris, and both of those paled in comparison to Constantinople in its glory days. Let's take Phocian tactics. Um, Actually, if you go to the Hagia Sophia today, but if you go to the Hagia Sophia today, you can see Viking era graffiti from visitors, which is just wild to consider. But I find it weirdly comforting that human beings really have not changed all that much from from the past. We're still the same creatures we always were. We'll still make graffiti on shit just to say we were there. Yeah, people will do that sort of thing. So, the thing you gotta understand about Viking era Russia is when the Vikings first arrived in what is now Russia, this was just a whole bunch of disorganized Slavic tribes. There was no real organized government to speak of. So the Vikings established Novgorod, which they at that time called Holmgard. And from there, they expanded down the river network using their ships and basically conquered all of this. Well, the thing is, they were basically a warrior elite minority of Vikings ruling over a vast majority of Slavs. Actually, many of those Slavs were sold into slavery to the Arabs. But when over time, the Vikings intermarried with the Slavs and adopted large parts of Slavic culture. So they kind of formed this hybridized mix of both Viking and early Slavic cultures, and they spoke Proto-Slavic, or at least Proto-East Slavic. And Kiev, Novgorod, and a bunch of the other big cities in Russia at that time were founded by Vikings as sort of trade outposts. But as the Viking population increased and they intermarried with native Slavs, they created basically modern Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians, who are largely Slavic, but you can still see in some of their names some Viking influence. So when Harald Hardrada was doing his thing, Kiev was still a somewhat Viking city. Even though at that point, most of the quote-unquote Vikings of the Kievan Rus had black hair and dressed like Slavic Khans rather than Viking warlords. They didn't look very much like Vikings at that point because they had so intermarried with the native people that most of the Viking genetics had been sort of eroded away at that point. It's sort of like how the Hungarians, when they first invaded, looked like Central Asians, but today they're indistinguishable from other Europeans neighboring them because they interbred with the native population so much that the sort of parent culture genetics got eroded over time. But also, that is true. The Romans were the world's first shit posters, and I love them for it. Honestly, reading old Roman graffiti, it's like perusing a 4chan board. It's fucking hilarious. Exactly. So the Hungarians came over as they were Central Asian Tengri pagans, but they converted under Saint Stephen, and as the kingdom became Christian, they did promote a lot of German migration, and most of those Germans actually settled in Transylvania. So even to this day in modern Romania, there are large German and Hungarian minorities in Transylvania. Yes. So, and actually, another weird place that Germans turned up. Well, yeah, that's where they came from. They were Germans who were invited to settle in Hungary when Hungary controlled Transylvania, and they're still there. They never left. Just like the Hungarians living in Transylvania as well. But another place that you might not think of there being large amounts of Germans is along the Volga. During the reign of Elizabeth the Great in Russia, she she invited a bunch of Germans to settle this largely depopulated region. And many did, and they became known as the Volga Germans. And they had a flourishing culture there until Stalin killed them all after World War II. They were either killed or deported to East Germany, and the Volga Germans became a thing of the past. The Teutonic Knights didn't settle much in Russia. They never really were successful in their military campaigns there. But later Germans did settle along the Volga. There was German settlement throughout the Baltic region, but it was never to the extent that it was elsewhere. And the other thing is, you got to realize about German settlement east of Germany is that most of those populations were exterminated or deported under Soviet rule. So prior to World War II, there were huge numbers of German settlements all throughout Eastern Europe. While Germany was in its sort of disunited, warring states period, a lot of Germans went east. Probably as many as went to the United States or South America. And they settled in various villages throughout the area. And when the Nazis showed up in World War II and swept across Eastern Europe, a lot of those Germans did help them. So after the war, Stalin used that as justification to expel or kill most of those German settlements. And a lot of them wound up in the East German Democratic Republic. Which, whenever a country has Democratic Republic in its name, you can be assured that it's neither democratic nor a republic. See the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. Oh, my daughter died. That sucks. Well, that's a lot of stress for me. And I have a mental break. Let's become a confider. That sounds good. But yeah, typically if a country needs to advertise how democratic and republican it is neither. Alright, can we make any more duchies? Yes, we can. Yeah, that is, the fascists tend to pick more grandiose names, from my experience. Right, so that was part of the justification. So, part of Hitler's reason for going after Czechia in particular is, at the time, the Sudetenland, which is basically this border region of mountains, was majority German. A lot of Germans settled there during the time of the Holy Roman Empire and the later Austro-Hungarian Empire. So there were a hell of a lot of Germans living in the Sudetenland, and that was Hitler's justification for invading. But part of his justification for Eastern Europe was there were still a shitload of Germans living in Eastern Europe, and his justification was they were being oppressed by the Slavs. Well, yeah, make of that what you will, but Hitler used that as an excuse. At least to the Germans. The excuse didn't carry a whole lot of water with the Allies, but a lot of the Germans, who at that point had been heavily propagandized to by the Nazis, did go with it. But large German populations living in this area, Katowice, as the Polish called it, a lot of Germans were living there. And then in the Danzig corridor, it was mostly German, actually. So, post World War II, they made a huge mistake when they gave this territory to Poland. Because while there were a fair number of Poles living there, it was majority German, at least in Danzig, which was the main city in the region. And the Germans had controlled it for quite a long time. So, and you also split the country in two, which is never a good idea. Also, that will be fun to play because my specialization in college was Chinese history. Also, I don't know enough about the Eastern Front of World War II to speak to that, but that would be interesting to study. But yeah, if there is like a solid mod that takes place in medieval China, I will play the shit out of that because that was one of my favorite periods to study in college. And actually, both of my I wrote both of my college papers, like my big college papers, on communist China in the Korean War. Also, it is. Chinese history itself is beyond fascinating. Um, but I have mostly studied the communists, really. That's where a lot of my specialization comes from my study of communist China and the sort of warlord period prior to World War II. Also, yes, he was. Mao Zedong puts both Hitler and Stalin to shame in terms of the sheer number of people that he killed. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen more from that, but this is Paradox we're talking about. Um, a lot of their DLCs are a little bit low effort. Um, but it would have been nice to see like an actual playable Tang Dynasty or something like that, because the Tang Dynasty was China's like one of China's cultural golden ages. A lot of great works of Chinese literature and art came from the Tang Dynasty. They were a cultural powerhouse. Exactly. It was the Tang, the Han, and the Ming were China's three great golden ages. I have seen that one, and it would probably be cooler to me if I knew more about Southeast Asia, but I've never really studied the region all that extensively. But I basically spent 4 years of my life doing nothing but studying Chinese history. So I know a lot of the Song did as well, but that's a period that the Chinese would also rather forget because that was three dynasties splitting China between themselves, and the Mongols showed up and started doing all their fuckery in roughly that time period. The Terracotta Army was created during the Qin Dynasty. They were supposed to be the guardians of the grave of Qin Shi Huangdi, who was the first Chinese emperor. He was the one who basically united the core of China. That is the sort of almost circular region between the mountains of western China and the coast. That has historically been China's core territory, and that was the first territory united by Qin Shi Huangdi. Though his reign was relatively short-lived, and when he was buried in a tomb filled with like mercury rivers, which is actually so toxic that we can't enter it today because it would kill anyone who tried. And the Terracotta Army was guarding it. So I can actually pull up a map and illustrate this for you. I find this sort of thing is easier to explain with maps anyway. So, hold on. So the Qin dynasty was China's first real imperial dynasty. And this is roughly... Oh, I can't pull it over the map. Damn it. Oh well. So, basically, if you look at a map of China, there is a big circular area between the mountains in the west and the coastline, and that has always historically been the coast of China. Yeah, there were supposedly a bunch of booby traps in his tomb, but we actually can't enter it. Most modern reconstructions of the tomb of Qin Shi Huangdi have to rely on digital reconstructions, simply because there's so much mercury in there, it is completely toxic to anybody who would try to enter it. Because Qin Shi Huangdi was a prolific drinker of mercury because he believed it had health benefits. Also, that would be a lot of fun. Really, the only Chinese time periods that would be fun in a Total War game would be the Warring States period, because typically the Chinese dynasties were usually pretty stable, all things considered. They had occasional civil wars, what empire didn't, but more often than not, they were pretty stable political bodies. The Tang Dynasty were one of the few times that the Chinese aggressively expanded outside of their traditional core territory and conquered parts of the Tarim Basin. And, yeah, but that was the... So, if you study Chinese history, you'll find that most Chinese dynasties follow the same basic cycle. You have a Warring States period, followed by an extremely legalistic dynasty that are widely regarded as assholes, see the Qin, that are replaced by a much less legalistic dynasty that tends to last a lot longer, see the Han. And this repeats time and time again throughout Chinese history, where you have short-lived dynasties that reunite the country after a Warring States period, that are replaced by a longer-lived... the corruption within... Basically, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The whole idea behind Chinese imperial dynasties is the mandate of heaven, and the Ming had the huge navy. The Ming dynasty actually explored well beyond the borders of China. There's actually some evidence they might have arrived in California at some point in the 14th or 15th century, because we have found Chinese coins in California. And Zheng He, who was a Chinese Muslim eunuch... No, you're good. You're good. I'm always happy to talk Chinese history. So Zheng He was a Chinese Muslim eunuch explorer who went far and wide. He went to Africa, he went down to Indonesia, and there is a decent chance he accidentally found his way to California, but he wasn't able to establish a long-term colony because that wasn't the goal of his mission. His goal was exploration, not settlement. And his ships were positively ginormous. So that is interesting. So the reason that... So humans are one of the most adaptable species on the planet. And we've managed to adapt to pretty much every continent. So you find local adaptations everywhere humans go. So, for example, lighter skin was developed as humans moved further north and there was less sunlight. So they needed to absorb more vitamin D from the sun. So lighter skin is good at that. So lighter skinned traits were favored as humans moved north because they were able to absorb vitamin D from the sun. And over time, those populations got lighter. In China, and the other thing you got to figure out with human evolution is a lot of developments are random gene mutations. So like blue eyes are just a random gene mutation that really doesn't have a whole lot of reason for existing other than that it was just a random mutation at some point in history that was passed on. But one of the major traits that you find in a lot of European populations as well as East Asian populations is epicanthal folds. I actually have them, which is a little. In Asians, it's typically more pronounced, but it's basically a flap of skin over the eye. And basically, what it does is it reflects light off of away from the eyes. That's so when snow is blanketing the ground, the sunlight reflects back into your eyes. The epicanthal folds push the sunlight away from the eyes, allowing better vision when it's sunny and snowing. Also, Zhenghe, Indonesia had already converted to Islam at that point, but he played a role in solidifying it. Other Muslim explorers from Arabia had already moved into the region by then. And they had spread it along their trade routes. But yeah, Indonesia has been Muslim for a long time. The religion came with Islamic traders and had a lot of staying power. Mostly because a lot of the more established East Asian religions hadn't really gotten to the region just yet. There were some Buddhists, but not many. Most of it was, exactly. There were a lot of Muslim merchants. Actually, one of my favorite Arab folk tales, Sinbad the Sailor, he's just based on a pirate that plied the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. And there were a lot of those. So, but prior to the development of the Suez Canal, there is a sharp divide between East and West here. And what you find is that the Roman Empire oriented the Middle East towards the Mediterranean. But the Islamic empires oriented the Middle East towards the Indian Ocean. So Damascus had been basically a backwater border town for the Romans, but under the Muslims it became a flourishing cultural hub, simply because of its proximity to the people they were trading with, i.e., India, China, and Southeast Asia. Well, India had a very long and well-established religious tradition at the time in the form of both Hinduism and Buddhism. Same story in China between Confucianism and Buddhism. But Southeast Asia had no such established religious tradition. It was largely folk beliefs, like traditional pagan religions. So the Muslims enjoyed a lot of traction there. That they didn't get in places like India. Well, there are plenty of Muslims in India, but they had a devil of a time actually trying to supplant the native Hindu religion, which is far older than Islam by thousands of years. Yeah, roughly, probably about 2,000 years. Because Hinduism goes back to at least the Indo-European invasion, probably before that. There were, but those were the exception, not the rule. Most of the people in Southeast Asia, at least the islands, typically practiced more folk beliefs. And the other thing you got to factor in is that Buddhism, yes, I would love to spend more time to study them. Most of my historical knowledge on Asia is centered around China, Korea, and Japan. I wish I knew more about Southeast Asia, and I would love to spend some time studying them in the future. But most of what I know about them relates to how they interacted with China, Korea, and Japan throughout their histories. But If you want some really fascinating architecture, look at ancient Cambodia, which was basically the heartland of the Khmer Kingdom. They built some of the most incredible architecture you will ever see, like Angkor Wat, which is just a big abandoned city. Um, so, kind of. More so the Sinosphere than the Indosphere. Um, all China is a little bit like the Rome of East Asia. All the nations that surround it borrow from it. Just like all the nations of Western Europe borrow from Rome, and actually Eastern Europe too, although they borrow from the more Greek Eastern Roman Empire. So you can see it in Japanese characters, where a lot of them were adapted from existing Chinese characters. That said, the Japanese language doesn't have a whole lot in common with with Chinese, but they did borrow Chinese characters. And the Korean alphabet, and it is an alphabetic writing script, does borrow a bit from the Chinese. So culturally, all the kingdoms and nations of East Asia borrow from the Chinese at some point. Just like France, Italy, Germany, Russia all borrow from Rome. The Indosphere I don't have as extensive a knowledge of because I never really studied Indian history in college. I mean, I studied a bit of it, sort of how it related, like during Alexander's conquest and very early in Indian history. But if you get much past, like, Chandragupta and his empire, I'm not all that well versed in it. Yeah, so a lot of the words are borrowed too, but the interesting thing about the Korean script is most of the writing systems of East Asia are syllabic or pictographic, like Chinese and Japanese. Chinese is pictographic, Japanese is syllabic, but Korean is a true alphabet, which is fascinating. That it's that far removed from what the Chinese and Japanese write with. Because the Japanese have symbols for syllables and the Chinese have symbols for words, but the Koreans have symbols for letters, which is pretty unique in East Asia because most alphabetic scripts are basically Central Asia westward. And that's largely due to the Latins, the Greeks, and originally the Phoenicians. So the Greek alphabet is actually based on the Phoenician alphabet, just adapted for the Greek language. That's true, but I'm saying it is still pretty unique for the region. But most alphabetic scripts go back to the Phoenicians, um, who were some of the first to develop a true alphabet that spread. Because the Greeks adapted it, and then the Romans adapted their alphabet from the Greek alphabet. And from that we get the modern sort of Latin alphabet that's used by pretty much all of Western Europe. Now, Cyrillic is a completely different animal. Cyrillic is interesting because it was developed by Greeks specifically for the Slavs. Um, Arabic is I don't know enough about it to say. I would think it is. I think it's related to the Hebrew alphabet simply because they're both Semitic languages. But honestly, I don't. I'm not an expert on Arab linguistic history. Um, I do know it is a completely different alphabetic root from what you get in Europe because most European alphabets are based on Phoenician at its origin point. Um, but the other thing that makes me think, I will do some research, and I'll tell you what. On the Sunday stream, I will let you know about that. But I cannot say with confidence what it's based on. Um, the Nabateans certainly were desert-dwelling Semites, so that might be a part of it. Um, but so back to Cyrillic for a moment. It was developed. It was, But so a lot of the Arab, when during the initial Muslim invasion, most of the Arabs were illiterate. So they largely relied on Persians and Byzantines. So that makes sense. So the way writing systems developed in Europe slash the Middle East is a bunch of slaves in the Sinai Peninsula adapted the Egyptian hieroglyphic system to their own language, creating the first alphabet. This spread to other Semitic peoples in the Levant, like the Phoenicians and the Jews, who developed the Phoenician and the Hebrew alphabets respectively. And then the Greeks got the idea for their alphabet from the Phoenician traders who would often ply the Eastern Mediterranean. That is true, but the Arabs had no writing system whatsoever. When they first began their invasion, they were almost a completely verbal culture. So it is probably based on ancient Phoenician and Semitic alphabetic systems. But the Greeks got the idea from the interesting. Return to Monkey is one of my favorite memes, but the Greeks got the idea for an alphabet from the Phoenicians, and from the Greeks it spread to the Romans, and from the Romans it spread to the rest of Europe. Now the key difference is in Eastern Europe, none of the Slavs used the Latin writing system, at least prior to the conversion of Poland to Christianity. That's why Polish is written with the Latin alphabet, and Czech is too, because they converted to Catholicism, so Latin had an influence on their language. Now, in Eastern Europe, they largely converted to Orthodox Christianity, which had a more Greek influence to it. And in, I want to say, the 9th century, the Byzantines sent 2 monks northward into Slavic territory, and they created the Cyrillic alphabet, which has a mix of Greek, Latin, and Hebrew characters that is basically custom tailored to Slavic languages. And that alphabet survives today in Russia, the Ukraine, Belarus, and parts of the Balkans. So you find that the Slavic nations that converted to Orthodox Christianity tend to use the Cyrillic alphabet, but the ones that converted to Catholic Christianity tend to use the Latin alphabet, which I always thought was fascinating. That's why Polish, to me, I think always looks like it's spelled a little weird, because the writing system was not developed for it. Whereas the writing system for Russian and Ukrainian, for example, was so Romanian is a weird duck as far as languages go. It's this isolated Romance language surrounded by Slavs and Turkic speakers, or slash Altaic, because that's, or Finno-Ugric, which is what the Hungarians speak. So yeah, you could use Cyrillic to write a Romance language. It wouldn't fit perfectly, but I mean, the Kazakhs use Cyrillic, even though their language is Altaic, not Slavic. But yeah, so the Cyrillic alphabet was developed by Greeks and specifically tailored to the Slavic language, which I think is why it tends to be very effective in conveying languages like Russian and Ukrainian. Actually, yes, I do. I had heard that, and it kind of makes sense. The Latin alphabet is far more widely used, and when you think about it, I mean, the Kazakhs probably have a few loanwords here and there from Russian, simply because they were part of Russian empires for about 200-300 years. But the language can be written with either, honestly, and it's way easier to just adopt a different alphabet than develop your own. There are a few countries that are sort of moving towards the Latin alphabet simply because it's much more widely used. Actually, this is Zaporozhye has formed. Huh. See, you should have seen the Anglo-Saxon game I was playing, because there, the Khazars converted all of this to Jewish, which I thought was really funny. But yeah, so honestly, I could rant about. I took a whole class. I took a very fascinating class in college, solely about the history of writing systems, taught by Dr. Gadadi, who was probably my favorite professor from my entire college experience. And she was very interested in writing systems and taught a few classes specifically around that. Yes, I have, but I never played it that far along. I once did one from Byzantium. I had a successful Byzantium game in CK2 that I exported to EU4, and that was a lot of fun to continue playing. But yeah, Dr. Gadadi was probably the biggest influence throughout my historical studies. She is a fantastic professor, and she was particularly interested in writing systems, so I took her class on the history of writing systems, and I learned a hell of a lot. Like, for example, that writing is one of those technologies that has emerged ex nihilo, meaning from nothing, in several different places. It emerges ex nihilo in the Middle East, in China, and in Mesoamerica. Completely unrelated to one another. But it's fascinating that that's one of the things that humans seemed to figure out no matter where they were and who they had contact with. But I wonder if she's still teaching. I hope she's still teaching that class. That was such a fun one. It was years ago that I took it. I know she's still at Towson. I hope she's still teaching that class. I'd love to have her on the podcast, honestly. But I haven't really covered any of the areas she specialized in. Like, if I do an ancient Middle East or ancient Egypt series, you can be damn sure I'll try to get her on the podcast, because she is fantastic. And I love that she was very sarcastic, which I very much enjoyed in my classes. Great professor. Also true, she actually said during that class that her academic goal was to decipher linear A, which we've had for a very long time, but we've never figured out. So linear A was, I always mix up the Mycenaeans and the Minoans. I want to say it was the Minoans. Sort of an ancient script from Crete that we still have no idea to even begin deciphering it. And linear B was like that for a very long time, until one scholar took the leap that it was expressing written Greek, and that worked perfectly. So by accident, we kind of figured out how linear B worked. But linear A remains a mystery, largely because we haven't the faintest idea what language it's expressing. Because usually what helps is if we know what language they're trying, especially if it's a language that's still spoken, like Greek, it's very helpful to know what language the writing system is trying to express. Now, we had similar problems deciphering Mesoamerican languages, or writing systems. We did, thankfully, eventually figure those out, for the most part. There are still a few things that we can't quite read. Egyptian is a rather fascinating script as far as writing systems go, because it develops so much over time. You have hieroglyphics, which are the famous one, and that's what most people like to study. And hieroglyphics are pictographic. They typically express a whole word or idea in a single image. And then you have hieratic, which is a syllabary, sort of like modern Japanese, where each character expresses a syllable. And then you have demotic, which is kind of weird, where it's about as close to an alphabet as you get in Egypt, but that's one of the few places where there are actually a lot of jobs for historians, is deciphering demotic script. The problem is it comes from not the most glamorous period in Egyptian history. It was largely developed during the period of Roman rule, which, in all fairness, is not a very interesting period in Egyptian history because it's pretty peaceful. There isn't a whole lot going on during Roman rule, at least until the very late period when you have sort of religious conflict between Christians and pagans, which I actually will be talking about in episode 8 of my current series. But Demotic has the least prestige because honestly it's kind of ugly to look at. It doesn't have the same sort of appeal that hieroglyphics or even hieratic do, and that they're kind of exotic and beautiful to look at. Demotic is kind of an ugly writing system, all things considered. At least compared to hieroglyphics and hieratic. And actually, in that class we learned about a rather lively historical debate between who developed writing first. Was it the Egyptians or was it the ancient Sumerians? Because proto-hieroglyphic and proto-cuneiform emerge at almost the same time, so it's difficult to say which one came first. And the people who tend to favor Egypt will say Egypt, and the people who tend to favor the Sumerians will say Sumeria and cuneiform. But really, it's one of those things that we'll probably never know, whether cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphics came first. Once you get past that point, it gets a lot easier to trace the history of writing systems, because at some point, alphabetic writing systems become the most efficient. Because you can express a lot of words. Well, Civ 5 is another thing. But if you really go back to the earliest proto-writing systems, honestly, they're only a couple centuries apart, so it is entirely possible that they emerge at the same time. But, everybody's got to be first. You talk to an Egyptian, they'll say they invented everything. You talk to a Greek, they'll say they invented everything. And you talk to an Italian, they'll say the Romans invented everything. So really, everybody just wants to be first. Chinese do the same thing. They'll tell you they invented everything. Really, all people have had considerable contributions throughout history. Oh, I'm not trying to attack the Greeks or the Chinese or anybody. It's perfectly natural for the older civilizations to claim ownership. And yeah, they did. The Chinese did invent pasta. But the Romans invented pizza, so... But yeah, that's true. There are some So it did, but pizza, sort of the earliest precursor to pizza as we know it today, emerged as ancient Roman street food. Believe it or not. Granted, they didn't have tomatoes, so it was all white pizza. But still, it was pizza. It was bread with sauce and cheese. Granted, the Romans had their own form of ketchup that we haven't quite figured out, and not like tomato-based, in the sense that it was a sort of ubiquitous condiment in the form of garum, which is some kind of fish sauce that we're still not 100% sure what it was. Yeah, we're still not 100% sure what went into it, but we know they loved it. The Romans were also notorious for putting vinegar on pretty much everything. Actually, Roman legionaries got a vinegar ration throughout the early empire. And I think that makes sense because vinegar you can make it from wine. And the Romans made a shitload of wine, so they also made a shitload of vinegar. True, but the Romans were not talking to the people in Southeast Asia. So I'm fairly certain they were invented ex nihilo without any influence from one or the other. About the only far east faction the Romans ever had any meaningful contact with would have been the Chinese. And that's something that's fascinating is the Chinese and the Romans both knew of each other, but they didn't contact each other directly because the Persians were in the middle. And they didn't want these two factions on either side of them talking to one another. But I think I'm going to call it a night. I've gone over a little bit, so that's it for me. I will see y'all on Sunday. Have a great night, everybody. Renegade Historian signing off.